My boss took credit for my work and fired me, but my contract clause turned them regret everything vertical bar corporate checkmate. He thought I would stay quiet, but I owned the code. When the board saw the truth, his smile vanished and everything changed. My name is Noah Carter, and if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who hold the knife. I wasn't always this cautious. I used to believe loyalty meant something. I used to believe hard work spoke for itself. But that was before everything happened. Before the betrayal. Before the humiliation. Before the corporate war I never asked for, but eventually won. And if you think this is just another sad workplace story, trust me, it's not. Because this story doesn't end with defeat. It ends with corporate checkmate. But before I tell you how everything fell apart and then shifted in my favor, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to the days when I still believed people were fair. Back when I believed my boss would appreciate my work. Back when I believed I mattered. I still remember the morning I first walked into Helix Tech Solutions, a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. The air smelled like fresh paint and burnt coffee, like ambition and rushing deadlines. People moved fast, typing aggressively, like every second of their life depended on a keyboard. I walked in with nothing but hope, a laptop, and a degree nobody cared about. But I worked hard, I learned fast, and people noticed. Well, most people. There were two people who mattered more than anyone. Bennett Hale, the CEO, calm voice, cold eyes, always smiling but never meaning it. And Logan Pierce, the senior manager, charming on the outside, rotten on the inside. Logan was the kind of guy who shook your hand while looking past you. The kind of man who laughed loudly so people thought he was confident, but inside, everything was insecurity. Still, people liked him. He dressed nice. He talked big. He knew how to impress. Me? I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I just worked. Late nights. No weekends. No parties. Sometimes, I'd look out the office window and see people laughing at a bar across the street, while I sat alone debugging code. The city lights blurred into streaks against the glass when my eyes got tired. But I kept going, because I was building something important, something revolutionary. An AI security system capable of detecting cyber threats before they even happened using behavioral prediction models and anomaly tracking. It wasn't just software, it was a shield, a way to prevent data theft before damage was done. Months passed, then a year, then almost 3, and finally, after constant testing, endless revisions, and sleepless nights, I finished it. I called it SentryGuard. When I presented the first working model to Logan, he stood silently for a moment, staring at the screen like he had discovered fire. Then he did something strange. He put his hand on my shoulder and said with a smile, "Nice work, Noah. Really. Impressive." But the way he said it didn't feel like recognition. It felt like possession. I tried to ignore the feeling. I wanted to believe he was proud. But deep down, something didn't feel right. A week later, Bennett called for a company-wide leadership meeting. I assumed I'd be demonstrating SentryGuard to the board. I ironed my shirt. I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I even wrote small reminders on sticky notes so I wouldn't freeze. But when I walked into the conference room, I froze anyway. Because there, standing at the front of the room with my entire presentation on the big screen, was Logan. He wasn't introducing me. He wasn't calling me forward. He was presenting my work as his own. My heart dropped. My stomach tightened. My hands went cold. At first, I thought maybe he would mention me at some point, but he didn't. Not once. He talked about his leadership, his research direction, his innovation. The board members clapped. People congratulated him. And I sat there, invisible. When the room cleared, I tried to speak. "Logan," I whispered, voice shaking. "Why would you?" He didn't let me finish. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said calmly, almost kindly, "Don't make this complicated, Noah. Some people build things. Some people present things. We each have a role." My throat tightened. "That's my work," I said. He smiled, that practice smile he always wore. "No, now it's ours. But let's be honest. The board will never believe you over me." He walked away like nothing happened. I stood there, feeling smaller than a shadow. Have you ever felt your achievements vanish right in front of you? Have you ever watched someone else steal something you poured your heart into, and everyone clapped for them instead? That moment changes you. Something in you cracks, and it cracked in me, but I wasn't angry yet. I was hurt, and hurt feels heavier than anger. That evening, I sat alone in the nearly empty office. Only the sound of the air conditioning and the quiet ticking of a wall clock kept me company. I stared at the computer screen, reading the project code I knew line by line. Every loop, every line, every input mine. My chest tightened, my eyes burned, and I whispered to myself, maybe I should walk away. But then another thought came, a stronger thought, a colder one. No, not like this. Because Logan didn't just steal my work. He stole me dignity, my effort, my voice. And I wasn't going to let that be the end of the story. Not yet, not ever. The next few days at work felt different. People acted like something had shifted, but nobody said anything. Some coworkers congratulated Logan and avoided eye contact with me. Others whispered behind screens and stopped talking when I walked by. It felt like I was slowly disappearing, like I was becoming a ghost in a building I helped build. But I still went in every morning, still did my work, still showed up. Maybe some part of me hoped that anyone would say, "Hey, this doesn't feel right." No one did, not even the people I once trusted. About 2 weeks later, HR sent me an email with the subject line, "Mandatory performance review, attendance required." My stomach dropped. Performance review? There had never been one scheduled for me. Not this early in the year. I walked to the glass conference room where the meeting was set. Through the window, I saw 3 people already sitting inside. Bennett, arms crossed, face unreadable. Logan smiling casually, spinning a pen between his fingers. Sophie Langford, HR director, neutral expression, folder in front of her. My legs felt heavy as I opened the door and sat down. Sophie cleared her throat. "Noah, thank you for joining us." I nodded. She continued, flipping through her papers. "We've received internal feedback regarding your performance and project involvement." My eyebrows pulled together. "What feedback?" Before she could answer, Logan leaned forward with that same rehearsed confidence. "The issue is engagement, Noah. You weren't proactive. You didn't take initiative. We needed leadership and you weren't ready." My chest tightened. "I built the system," I said quietly. "Every part of it." Logan chuckled softly and dismissively. "You contributed to development, but leadership and system design came from me." I stared at him. He didn't blink. Bennett finally spoke, voice cold and efficient. "We've evaluated the situation and decided to move forward without your role at Helix Tech." Just like that. No warning. No discussion. No acknowledgement. Just removal. My jaw tightened. "So you're firing me?" Sophie glanced down, avoiding eye contact. "Unfortunately, yes." There was a silence, long, sharp, suffocating. Not anger. Not shock. Just numbness. I took a slow breath, stood up, and asked one question. "Is this because he wants my work without me attached to it?" Logan didn't look ashamed. He just smiled. A quiet, calm smile. The kind narcissists use when they think they've already won. "You should focus on moving on, Noah." That sentence, that tone, it wasn't advice. It was dismissal, a final push out the door. I swallowed my pride and nodded slowly. "Okay." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply walked out. And while Logan thought that meant he had beaten me, he had no idea what he had just activated. I went home that night and sat in silence. My apartment felt colder than usual. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of rain against the window, everything felt louder. I placed my laptop on the table, opened the old scanned PDF file of my employment agreement, and scrolled until I reached Section 14B, Intellectual Property Rights. And there it was, the sentence my lawyer insisted on adding when I first signed the offer letter. "All intellectual property created by the employee independently, including outside of working hours, using personal tools or environments remains owned solely by the employee, unless a written transfer contract exists." And there was no transfer contract, no amendment, no signature, no exception. Which meant, Sentry Guard wasn't theirs. It was mine. My hands shook, but not from fear, from clarity, from justice taking shape, from power shifting. Slowly, silently, undeniably. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my attorney, Alicia Monroe. She was sharp-minded, soft-spoken, and terrifying in court. When I finished telling her everything, she leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "Noah," she said calmly, "you don't just have a case. You have leverage." She pulled the contract closer and tapped her finger on the IP clause. "This sentence alone means they cannot use, present, license, or launch the software without your consent." I exhaled, relief finally breaking through the hurt. "What do we do?" She smiled, not a warm smile, a strategic one. "We move quietly." The next 2 weeks became a silent storm. First, Alicia drafted and sent a cease and desist order to Helix Tech directly to Bennett and the board of directors. Then we filed a legal notice of ownership and patent claim. Finally, the finishing move. We submitted a public intellectual property protection notice to all major investors and tech partners connected to the future launch. That meant one thing: every person who intended to profit off my work now had to face the risk of a lawsuit, and Helix Tech could no longer hide the truth. One morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, then 5, then 12. A message came through from an old coworker. "Dude, something exploded here. Investors want answers. Lawyers everywhere. Logan looks pale." Another message: "They're canceling the product launch. Board is furious." And then the final one: "Logan blamed you, but Bennett pulled up documents. Your contract, your emails, your timestamps. They know." I sat there, staring at my phone, not smiling, not celebrating, just breathing. Slow, steady breaths. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. 3 days later, Alicia called me. Her voice sounded calm, almost too calm. "Noah," she said, "Helix Tech just filed a response. They want a meeting." I froze. "A meeting? With me?" "Yes," she replied. "The board requested it, and they want it confidential." There was a pause, a long, meaningful one. Then she added, "That means they're scared." And she was right. Companies only asked for quiet meetings when things were slipping out of their control, when public exposure became a threat. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't celebrate. I just took a breath and said, "Okay, let's hear what they want." The following week, I found myself sitting in a tall glass building in downtown Seattle, a law office overlooking the city. Alicia sat beside me, calm and collected. Across the table sat Bennett's stiff posture, jaw tense. 2 board members, one anxious, one unreadable. And finally, Logan. His confidence was gone. His suit looked perfect, but his eyes looked tired. For the first time, he didn't smile. Alicia opened the meeting. "Before we begin, let me make one thing clear. Noah owns the intellectual property. He has full legal right to prevent any development, distribution, or marketing of his work." Silence. Then Bennett finally spoke. "Noah, this situation escalated faster than expected. Maybe we all made mistakes." Alicia cut him off. "Mistakes? You fired him, then attempted to launch a product built by him, under another employee's name." The board member on the left exhaled, sharply frustrated. Bennett's tone hardened. "We want to resolve this privately. We're prepared to offer compensation." Alicia leaned back. "What number?" Bennett slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer. I read it, and I almost laughed. It was money, yes, but nowhere near the value of the software. Not even a fraction. It was the kind of offer meant to silence someone who didn't know better. I closed the folder slowly and looked at him. "That's not enough." Bennett's jaw tightened. Logan finally spoke. "Noah, man, think logically. You can fight this, sure, but big companies win. They always do." There it was. The arrogance. Even now, after everything, he thought he was untouchable. I stared at him for a long moment and said quietly, "You know what the difference is between us, Logan?" He swallowed, waiting. "You think power comes from position." I tapped the contract clause printout. "But real power comes from ownership." His face went pale. Alicia slid a new document toward them, thicker than theirs. "This is Noah's licensing proposal," she said. "Not a settlement, not a buyout, a license." The board member raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Alicia smiled professionally. "You don't buy the software. You rent it at Noah's price for limited usage, and he retains ownership forever." Logan's voice cracked a little. "That's absurd. He can't control the product like—" Alicia interrupted again. "He already does." Then she leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for everyone. "And if this meeting fails, he licenses it to your top competitor, who already showed interest." The board members exchanged a look. Fear. Real fear. Bennett couldn't hide the panic building behind his controlled expression. "Give us 48 hours, he said. Alicia nodded. "We'll wait." When we walked out of that building, I expected to feel victorious. But instead, I felt tired. Drained. Like years of working, trusting, and holding everything inside had finally caught up with me. At the crosswalk outside the building, Alicia looked at me and asked quietly, "How are you feeling?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know." She nodded, understanding more than I said. "Winning doesn't always feel good at the beginning," she replied. "Sometimes it feels like grieving," and she was right, because even though I had power now, part of me couldn't stop thinking about everything I lost. My time, my trust, my belief that people in leadership knew what fairness meant. 2 days later, the board responded. They had accepted the licensing terms but with one additional demand. They wanted to terminate Logan as part of the resolution. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. I didn't ask for him to be fired. I didn't demand it. But karma moved on its own. Alicia looked at me. "You don't have to agree with everything in their terms," she said. "It's your call." I sat quietly for a moment. Then I asked, "Will they still license the software without that condition?" She checked the documents. "Yes." "Then remove it." She blinked, surprised. "You're letting him stay?" I shook my head. "No, I'm letting them decide whether he stays. Because sometimes the worst punishment isn't losing a job. It's having people finally see who you really are. And I wanted that weight to sit with him, not with me." Alicia nodded, respect in her eyes. "I'll finalize it." 2 weeks later, the deal was signed. Helix Tech licensed my technology. I was paid what the project was truly worth, more money than I ever imagined earning. And Logan? He didn't survive much longer, not because of me, but because the board finally looked at him without the illusion he built around himself. Word spread that he was removed from the project, then from leadership, then from the company. Some said he left quietly, some said he tried to fight, but it didn't matter anymore. The game was over, and the pieces had shifted. The first morning after everything became official, I walked past the Helix Tech building just once, not out of spite, just closure. The lobby lights were dim. People moved slowly. The excitement that once filled the halls was gone, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just peace. When Monday arrived, I woke up earlier than usual. No rushing. No anxiety. No fear. Just calm. It felt strange at first, like the moment right before a storm finally breaks, except this time, I was the storm. By 8:30 a.m., I was parked outside the building, the same place I had dragged myself to for years, believing loyalty mattered. Today, loyalty no longer lived here, but consequences did. I walked inside slowly, confidently, not sneaking in like someone ashamed or out of place, but like someone who owned the ground under their feet. People stared. Some whispered. Some widened their eyes like they'd seen a ghost, because to them, I was once someone they thought was gone. The receptionist froze. Logan?" she stammered. I smiled politely, not angry at her. She didn't put the knife in my back. "Yes, I'm here for a scheduled meeting with the executive review board." Her eyes widened further. She knew what that meant. She buzzed security not to stop me, but to escort me upstairs as required for formal board attendance. When the elevator doors closed, the guard beside me cleared his throat. "Just so you know," he whispered, leaning slightly toward me, "half the office is rooting for you." I raised an eyebrow. He chuckled. "No joke. Word spread after that recruitment email leaked. Some people have been waiting for it today." I didn't know whether to laugh or feel sorry because that meant there were more victims, just quieter ones. When the doors opened, I stepped into a long glass conference room overlooking the city skyline. The entire board of directors sat around the table, including the CEO, a cold-faced man named Raymond Carter. Jessica sat near him, professional, polished, and visibly nervous. When she saw me, her face went pale, almost gray, like someone who had seen her future crumble in real time. She forced a smile. "Oh, Logan, I didn't realize you would be attending in person. We thought your attorney." "My attorney," I interrupted calmly, taking a seat, "will be here shortly." The board murmured. Jessica's composure dropped for a split second. Then the CEO cleared his throat. "So, Mr. Hayes," he began, folding his hands, "we're here to clarify a disagreement regarding ownership of the SecureSync project." "Disagreement?" I repeated quietly. "That's one way to phrase theft." Jessica stiffened. The CEO frowned but didn't interrupt. "Before we proceed," he said, "do you have any materials you wish to introduce?" "Yes," I said. "Contracts, dated work logs, repository ownership certificates, email trails, and my original licensing agreement." Jessica tried to speak, but just then, the door opened. My attorney stepped in, a confident man named Gregory Pike, Fallmare corporate litigator. Very, very expensive. Jessica's eyes widened. Raymond nodded politely, though clearly uneasy. We handed over printed copies of everything, and as pages flipped, the room shifted. Silence, confusion, then tension. Finally, sharp recognition of the scale of the mistake. The CEO leaned forward. "This licensing clause," he said slowly, tapping the contract, "explicitly states that any intellectual property developed by you, including refinement, rewrite, or deployment remains owned by you unless formally transferred. It was never transferred, I said. The CEO glanced at Jessica. Did you know about this clause? She swallowed. I don't recall seeing it. My attorney smiled politely. That's unfortunate, he said. Because according to these emails, Mr. Hayes reminded you twice. He slid printouts forward. Her own replies were highlighted. Noted. We'll sign the addendum later. Just finalize the version first. We'll deal with legal formalities afterward. Jessica went pale. She looked at the CEO, then at the board, desperate for backup. None came. One board member, an older woman with sharp glasses, spoke first. So, let me confirm. We fired the person who legally owns the project we are currently using in production without obtaining licensing or transfer rights. Greg nodded. That is correct. And now a competing Fortune 100 company wants to license it. Correct again. Silence. Then the CEO's voice, low, sharp, controlled. This could cost us millions. Greg corrected him. It already has. The CEO exhaled, then leaned forward. Logan, what do you want? I looked at Jessica first. She avoided eye contact, pretending to study her nails or the pattern on the table. This isn't just about money, I said. It's about accountability. Her jaw tightened. And respect. Raymond gestured. Be specific. So I was. I want the company to acknowledge in writing that I am the original creator and owner of SecureSync. He nodded slowly. I want the licensing deal signed with my terms untouched. Another nod. And I want Jessica removed from any involvement in the project moving forward. Jessica snapped her head toward me. You can't. Raymond raised a hand, silencing her. I continued. And finally, I want a public correction. Not an apology, a clarification. The CEO frowned. What kind of clarification? That I was not fired for incompetence but for refusing to surrender ownership. Jessica looked furious now, like the mask she wore cracked, and she didn't have time to glue it back on. You're being unreasonable, she hissed. No, I said quietly. For the first time in a long time, I'm being fair to myself. The CEO turned to the board. All in favor of accepting Logan Hayes' terms? Hands rose. Not one, not three. Every single hand. Jessica's face collapsed. Shock, anger, and disbelief, twisting into something raw and ugly. The CEO looked at her. Effective immediately, he said, voice clipped and cold. You are suspended pending investigation for misconduct and breach of internal policy. She whispered something, but her voice was too faint to hear. Then security was called, and she was escorted out. She didn't look back. Not once. The meeting ended with signatures, handshakes, and numbers, life-changing ones printed onto paper that now legally protected everything I built. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was walking out of that building not as someone discarded, but as someone finally recognized. I stepped outside, sunlight hitting my face. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel used. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. A month later, I started working fully remotely on the version of SecureSync licensed to Titan Tech Security, the company that had reached out. They treated me with respect, patience, and maturity. And with their investment, I expanded it, turning it from a code base into a full security suite. And sometimes, very rarely, Jessica emails me. Short messages. No apology. Just regret disguised as questions like, do you remember the optimization values you used for the encryption cluster? Would you be open to discussing a consulting arrangement? I never respond, because some bridges aren't burned. They're walked away from quietly, while the other side collapses under its own weight. Absolutely, here is the final emotional closing arc. Tone, pacing, and style will remain consistent with the previous chapters. Life after that boardroom showdown felt different. Quieter, calmer, almost peaceful. But peace wasn't silence, it was the absence of chaos. For years, I had convinced myself that loyalty meant staying even when staying cost me my dignity. I believed that if I kept my head down, worked harder, and proved myself, then eventually someone would recognize my worth. But sometimes, the people who benefit from your silence are the ones most terrified of your voice. And now I finally had one, and the world was listening. Over the next few months, SecureSync evolved far beyond the original vision. With Titan Tech's support, I built a team not out of necessity, but out of opportunity. I carefully chose developers and cybersecurity engineers who reminded me of the younger version of myself, the ones who worked hard, dreamed bigger, and just needed someone to believe in them. Their names didn't matter as much as their values. Integrity, curiosity, courage. Every meeting felt like the exact opposite of the environment I had left. No power plays, no forced silence, no walking on eggshells around someone who wanted control instead of collaboration. The project flourished. Within 6 months, SecureSync became one of Titan Tech's flagship technologies. Licensing interest flooded in from firms, hospitals, fintech startups, and even a federal agency. One morning, my inbox showed a projected valuation. When I saw it, my chest tightened. SecureSync, the same project someone once claimed wasn't worth protecting, was now valued at $47.8 million. I sat there staring at the number, not smiling, not celebrating, just absorbing. Because success didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like breathing normally after holding your breath for too long. About 2 months after that valuation email, I received a message request on LinkedIn. The profile picture looked familiar: dark hair, sharp business suit, polished confidence. But the name? Jessica Stone. I stared at it for a moment before opening the message. Logan, I heard about SecureSync's growth and Titan Tech's investment. I also recently found out my termination was finalized. I know things didn't end well between us, but I would like the chance to talk. Maybe coffee? No pressure. Coffee. As if we were old friends. Not someone who turned my passion into her stepping stone and called it leadership. For a second, just one, I wondered if I should ignore it. But then I remembered something my father used to say. Closure isn't what they give you. Closure is what you give yourself. So I replied, sure. One conversation. Nothing more. We met at a small cafe downtown. One of those quiet places where conversations mattered more than appearances. When she walked in, she wasn't the same confident woman who once dismissed my concerns or spoke over me in meetings. She looked smaller, not physically, just emotionally, like someone who finally understood the cost of the choices she made. She sat down slowly, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for meeting me," she murmured. I nodded, waiting. Silence hung between us. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "I thought stepping on people was how you succeeded in corporate. I thought being tough meant being unapproachable, and I thought controlling the narrative was more important than respecting the people who built it." She swallowed hard, but I was wrong. For the first time in a long time, she didn't sound defensive, angry, or superior. She sounded human. "I hurt you," she continued, voice softer now. "I took advantage of your trust, and I didn't think there would ever be consequences." Her eyes met mine, tired, honest. "I'm sorry." There it was. Not the words I expected, and definitely not the words I needed. Because the truth was, my healing didn't depend on her apology. It happened long before this conversation, the day I chose myself over fear. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But this isn't about revenge anymore." She blinked, confused. "I don't hate you," I continued. "I don't carry anger around. I don't replay what happened." She seemed almost stunned. "Then, what do you feel?" I took a breath. "Gratitude." Her eyebrows lifted. "If you hadn't pushed me the way you did, if you hadn't crossed the line, I never would have walked away. I never would have realized my own worth, and SecureSync never would have become what it is now." Her eyes glistened, whether from regret or relief. I couldn't tell. "You didn't break me," I said quietly. "You redirected me." We talked a few more minutes, not about the past, not about blame, but about moving forward. She told me she was interviewing for smaller companies, rebuilding her career, learning humility. I wished her well, not because she earned it, but because carrying bitterness only keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "Logan," she said softly. "Yes?" Did I lose the job, or did I lose the person who made the job valuable? I held her gaze. "You lost yourself," I replied gently. "But that's fixable if you want it to be." She nodded, a small, broken smile forming. Then she walked away, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I felt closure. A year later, SecureSync became an independent subsidiary, and I became CEO. Not out of ego, but out of purpose. Employees described the culture as safe, fair, inspiring, empowering, and that mattered more than the valuation. Because success isn't just about winning, it's about building something you don't have to recover from. Something rooted in dignity, not fear. Some nights I sit in my office, city lights outside, quiet music playing, and I think back to the version of myself who once stayed silent. The version who whispered ideas instead of owning them. The version who believed being overlooked was normal. And I wish I could tell him, "You aren't replaceable, you aren't invisible, and you never needed permission to be valuable." Looking back now, I realized something important. Life isn't always fair. People won't always treat you with respect. Some will take advantage of your silence, your kindness, your effort. But that doesn't mean you stop being good. It means you learn to protect yourself. It means you learn when to walk away. And sometimes, walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom. What happened to me wasn't just about a stolen project or a ruined job. It was about identity, confidence, self-worth. For a long time, I thought my value depended on someone else's approval. But now I know the truth. Your worth isn't measured by who accepts you, but by how you rise after being underestimated. And maybe the hardest moments of our lives are really just the moments preparing us for something bigger. I don't hate the people who betrayed me. I don't wish them harm, because without them, I might still be in that same old office working late nights, hoping someone would finally see me. In a strange way, their betrayal became my turning point. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never let someone convince you that your voice, your work, or your dreams are small just because they fear how big they could become. Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And you never know, your story might help someone else find courage. Also tell me which city you're listening from. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And remember, sometimes the victory isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the peace of knowing you didn't give up on yourself. Take care of yourself, and never forget your worth.